So we're in the first 30 seconds of any stream where we go, did it work? Did it not work?
Is this thing on? Can you
Nothing's
hear me?
exploded?
We've been live for the last 10 seconds.
All right, so we've been live for 10 seconds. All right. Welcome to the first panel of WotCon, obviously the best panel. And so what we're going to do is just not talk about Wheel of Time and talk about other stories. So this is Ta'Veren and Other Stories.
To be fair, that is a Wheel of Time concept.
That is a good point.
Other story.
Right, right. All stories are part of the Wheel of Time, and therefore it's all in the Wheel of Time. Well done.
So it's all canon.
It's all canon.
Yes.
Except when Disney takes over, then none of it will be canon.
Oh, please.
Honestly, like Disney and Amazon will probably never. I can't see them combining.
I mean, that's what we said about Disney and Fox, but
Damn it.
And today's panel is conspiracies and other. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
So I thought we'd start by getting an idea. So this is Ta'Veren and Other Stories. What is a Ta'Veren? Right? That's sort of where I want to start with it and figure out, how are we going to define what a Ta'Veren is? And does anybody else have an answer to the question? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Wandering Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry.
To sherbet mango.
Hot Mike in the room?
Thank you. So I kind of think of Ta'Veren as like a Deus Ex Machina, but for a character itself. And so whenever I read the panel description, the first character I thought of was Harry Dresden. Because he is someone that, yes, he does advertise in the newspaper as a Chicago's only wizard, but things seem to come to him, and as his art progresses, you bring in more and more worlds that kind of come to him. So,
well, isn't that because he's like a Star Lord or something like that? Oh, sorry. Yeah. No.
So it just, Ta'Veren feels to me like it's characters that are at the right place at the right time over and over and over and over again for plot purposes.
Lovely. Nice. Thank you. Anybody else have any other takes on Ta'Veren?
And that's okay.
That's okay.
One over here and one up there.
My name is Brian. I'm down from Cleveland. Been reading since 2003. This is not an AA meeting. I have an active beer, but I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Actually, to tell you the honest truth, I can't remember the author and the name, and it's angering me in my own brain that I can't remember it. But there was an author who had a spin-off trilogy, and ironically, the character, I believe his name was also Huron, H-U-R, but I believe it was H-U-R-A-N, if memory serves correct. So similar, but he was exactly no similarities at all. But he in the main series that the guy wrote, this character would always show up. Basically, he was plot armor. Like if the main character of the main story couldn't get out, he was plot armor. This character would show up, dig the guy out, and then that character would disappear. And then that character basically got his own origin story in there. And to me, that was kind of like Ta'Veren, where he was always there. Plot armor is kind of always what I took as Ta'Veren, but not necessarily like in the writing sense, like previously said, like right place, right time, type of thing.
So that seems to be how the world affects Ta'Veren. Is there any way? How does Ta'Veren affect the world? And do you want to?
Yes.
Oh, I had you first, and then in the back.
Yes.
That is Huron the Accuser character.
I'm sorry, that's Marvel.
Okay.
I'm not.
Ronan.
I tried looking it up.
Ronan's the
okay.
accuser.
I may be wrong on the spelling of the pronunciation, but it's something along those lines. Again, it's 1,000 books are going through my head right now.
Sure.
But he's one of the guys that popped in.
Understood.
So-
So we do have one over here.
Koala
The mic
first.
over there.
Wandering Mike. Wander.
Koala.
Say
Behind.
your name in there first.
Koala Sadai here.
Hi, Koala.
Hello, everyone.
So happy
We
to
love the
see you.
cards.
So I would think of Robin Hobb's books, the Assassin trilogy, particularly in the beginning, and the word catalyst.
Mhm.
So Fitz was able to completely change history simply by the fact that he was born.
Mhm.
And so then
First name on my
everything-
list.
Yep. So
Yep.
everything then just kept swirling around and around him, even regardless of what he did. So yeah, I think that's a great Tiberan kind of
Even-
example, is that
Yeah.
catalyst.
Even the Fool, I think, says it outright in those
Yeah.
books. He's like, "You are the stone I'm going to use to turn the world. Basically, I'm going to put you in the rut of existence."
Nice.
Yeah.
One more.
I think we had one in the back first. No, okay.
My concept was also catalyst.
Oh, okay.
Amazing.
It's almost like we agree on stuff.
Nice to meet you. Random Noman, been reading since 96,
Random.
97.
Hi.
I think one of the interesting things for this is when I was still looking at the description was main character energy, main character doesn't make you Ta'Veren. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the things we have to think about in the conversation is just because you're main character doesn't make you Ta'Veren.
Yeah.
So I think just keep that in mind.
Anybody who couldn't hear, he was just saying that main character
Okay.
energy doesn't make you
done now.
a Taveran.
Yes. There are things that main characters can have that make Taviran, but main character does not a Taviran make.
And for me, a big difference is a main character. Important things happen in their lives. In a Taviran, important things happen in everybody's lives, right? A Taviran's going to affect the entire world, or a large region, or a large group of people. Whereas, main character, things are going to happen for them, as opposed to for the rest of the world.
Well, so I'm going to jump in here for just a moment.
Please.
And please, if anybody has any other thoughts, obviously ask for the mic and we will pass it around. But I actually, when I was thinking about this, I had 3 criterion that are sort of just like varying degrees of, you have to have some piece of all 3 of these things.
Sure.
And that is, number 1 is kind of the most important one, which is that sort of Deus Ex Machina, that like last minute plot armor, which granted, part of the frustrating thing here is that's also good writing
Mhm.
more often than not, because of course a character getting into hairy situations and then getting themselves out or having someone else get them out, obviously good writing is believably, bad writing is unbelievably.
It's when Han Solo comes back in the trench run. It's
Yes.
like, oh,
No,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But
yeah.
again, it's that setup.
Seth
for
just
that
stole
happening,
my answer.
right? But again, it's that setup for that happening beforehand to make it a payoff later. But it is still that Deus Ex Machina, that moment of you as the reader or you as the watcher knows that this is going to go horribly wrong, and then it does not. Or it happens differently than you thought it did. It doesn't necessarily have to always work out, but it does have to go differently than you thought it was and not horribly wrong. Number 2 was that people act differently around them, often to the point of giving them something necessary that they need. And so this goes back to your point
That's a
about
good example.
in some ways, it doesn't necessarily need to be as much as a nation, but like individuals at least need to act out of character. There needs to be that messing with probability. There needs to be that messing with the threads of fate that bring that person into this situation that they would not have been in if that Taviran hadn't been there.
The sea folk negotiating.
Yeah, it harkens back to the sea folk
Yeah.
negotiation. Varen literally not being able to leave a town with all of the Two Rivers novices that she's bringing to the tower. Like all of those things of there's a Taviran too close. And then the third one was that they this is more of a sort of like tertiary one because Rand is a Taviran. Arthur Hawkwing is a Taviran, and they are described as such. Matt and Perrin are also described as Taviran, and so I threw in sort of a connection to other characters that is sort of overwhelming. Because while Rand sort of doesn't run around seeing flashes of Matt and Perrin, the other 2 are inextricably linked to him and each other. They get pulled to his energy. They see his they see what he's doing, they see these flashes of color, and every time they try to leave, they keep getting pulled back. And so it's kind of that like planets circling around a sun. And so Rand doesn't necessarily need those connections to other people where he's being pulled, because he is the puller. But the other two Taviran end up being stuck in his gravitational field.
I mean, I would say though that just like with planets, you have a pull back, right?
Sure.
Rand is
Yeah,
being
yeah,
pulled back on by
Correct.
Matt and Perrin, and I think the fact that they sort of disappear for a while,
Right,
it does leave him in a little bit of a lurch.
No, it does. And
Yeah.
he definitely goes strongly into his Darth Rand phase,
Mhm.
partially because Matt and Perrin are not there.
All right, so I think we've got.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What you were just talking about, and hi, I'm April
Hi,
Hi,
April.
from Washington D.C. By way of Philly. Anyway, what you just said struck a massive chord with me, and it is the same series. It's the Dresden Files, but it actually made me think of the Knights of the Cross.
Yep.
Because they are always sort of inextricably pulled,
Mhm.
like to your point just a few seconds ago about Rand is a Taviran, but it's Perrin and Matt are connected to him. So the Knights are connected to Harry, and will kind of in that Deus Machina, literally, because they're connected to God in the series.
That's about as
Always
literal as that
kind of
phrase
end
gets.
up in the right place. Like one in one of the more recent books, Sasha. It was like Sasha kept trying to get on a plane. Like he kept trying to leave Chicago, and no matter what he tried to do, natural forces would occur so that he could not leave Chicago. Natural forces, like he get on a plane, the plane is delayed because of a storm. He's like, oh well, I'll just rent a car. No, you can't rent a car. It's too much. There's too much snow. You can't rent a car. Like all these things to just keep him in town because he needed to be there to support our main character and to save lives and whatever. But it always happens with the Knights of the Cross that they always are in like where they need to be to facilitate the story and to facilitate our heroes in the story as well.
So I just talked a bunch. Do you guys have any additional criteria or anything that you want to bring up that you were thinking about?
I mean, I think connection to other characters, people act differently, last minute plot armor, influencing the world around you, events. I think that's enough criteria to really establish like a good solid basis for what a Taviran is. Maybe we can each give an example of ones that we thought about ahead of time for a second, and then we'll pass the mic back over to the audience.
Do we want to let Fardar's my grandma
Let's go ahead.
kick us off?
Well, because of my voice, I'm going to limit mine. Instead of the 3 I was going to do, I'm going to do 1. I'm choosing Ayla from the Clan of the Cave Bear series by Gene Owl. So I see some nodding heads, so some of you know who I'm talking about.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Who's here read Clan of the Cave Bear? Okay.
I've heard good things.
Okay, so basically, prehistory, there are modern humans, of which Ayla is one. There are Neanderthals, who are called the Clan. They mostly do not mix. Ayla is orphaned at a very young age. Earthquake, her parents are killed. She's left wandering on the tundra. Is found by a clan group of Neanderthals. Ordinarily, they would say, oh, child of the others, and walk on. But lo and behold, they pick her up. They feed her, they raise her. She's not a Neanderthal. She doesn't think the way they think. She changes that clan and that world by being herself. She becomes a hunter, and they allow it. They don't kill her for doing it. That's unheard of. It just does not happen. She has a child that, because it is mixed heritage, Neanderthal and a modern human, is considered deformed. It's a very harsh world. Deformed children are left out and exposed and murdered. Her son lives. She changes the world to make it a place where her people and the clan people can live together.
And I would say that the author is writing hundreds of thousands of years of technological discoveries, but they're all happening to this one person, right? It's like we are going from prehistory to essentially, early civilization, and all the discoveries along the way are being made by this one main character. And so it's very interesting to see the evolution of civilization, but at the same time, obviously one person didn't discover all of these things in real history, right? But she does, and there's also for me, it's very much going back a Raised by Wolves situation.
Yeah.
Because the Neanderthals in this series are probably closer to Perrin's wolves. They have ancestral memory. They're very not human. Like they're not, we've now learned that Neanderthals are nothing like the actual Neanderthals in the books, but think of them as a magical people that exist separate from modern people. And
yes, there is a minimum of that in the first book, though.
Yes.
In the later books, you are absolutely right. She becomes a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
But in the first book, I think she's more closely a Taviran.
Yes.
And I will just mention my other two Taviran were going to be Miles Vorkosigan Saga, Space Opera, Lois McMaster's Bejeweled, and Manoli of the Harper Hall of the Dragon Rider series by Anne McCaffrey.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that, the character, because I've not read the series. A lot of the things that you were just describing about that character, I don't know if anyone here has played the Horizon Zero Dawn games. That actually sounds a lot like someone just borrowed from this book. And granted, I mean, they do a lot of different stuff, and I haven't read the book, so I don't know how closely, but still sort of the idea of orphaned, taken in by people who shouldn't have, she's the one who becomes the bridged connection to the modern world, because in the game, just super quick and dirty.
You're not totally off base.
It's this, the society is ours. They get to be particularly advanced in the next 100, 200, 300 years. And then there is this, their own creation machine apocalypse event. And it is very, the whole thing is an allegory for global warming and climate change. In the end, and so then they the whole earth gets re-terraformed and people get brought back into it, but they lose all of the knowledge of the past. And so again, there are these new people who are running around as Neanderthal-esque. I mean, they're still modern humans because they're cloned from modern humans, but they're very Neanderthal-esque. And then this one person who rediscovers a lot of this ancient history, and so it's that bridging of the gap. And I'm oh, so maybe this wasn't as original as I thought.
There are no original stories.
Stories.
There's just the wheel.
So I had a really hard time, and I am playing fast and loose with other stories, and could not get Star Wars out of my head when considering Taverin and how it affects how we perceive at least our main characters or our supporting characters.
If you don't ask Disney, there are enough books and enough graphic novels that it counts.
Thank you. So anyways, and I actually had workshopped this a little bit with a couple of other people, and I have two candidates from Star Wars, and I would like to kind of propose mine as discussion for the group, as opposed to just taking a stance and drawing a line.
Okay.
So I really very much was not thinking about it with such incredibly specific and intelligent criteria like one Aman Khan Mahal used. However, I was thinking, what are stories that I'm very familiar with, characters I love deeply, who I've seen just fall up every single time. And so that's how I wound up at Star Wars, because that's my happy place. And I would like you to consider who's more Taverin by your definition, whichever one you choose. Would it be Han Solo or would it be C-3PO? And my reason is Han Solo, first off, you can debate whether or not he's considered a main character. I'm not going to get into that discussion. But he certainly has an effect on the world around him and the outcome of the story in a lot of ways. And also, it does seem like a bit of a plot armor device in that he gets off really light sometimes. Like it's not that he doesn't face his adversities, but he gets off light sometimes. And then another thought that was brought to me was C-3PO, who is, has less impact on the story. It doesn't change the world around him, like we were mentioning. However, also falls up miraculously in every story, whether he is sold off as parts or whether he winds up being attacked by stormtroopers, whatever it might be. He's just another one that the story always propels him wherever he needs to be, and he always comes through it. It never is the end of him. He always makes it to the end of the story. So that was my Star Wars proposal for you guys.
So I'm going to take the first crack at this. Unsurprising.
Yeah.
I think that Han Solo is probably the Taviran. I think that C-3PO is the Loyal. I think that C-3PO, what we don't know is that C-3PO is seeing all of what's going on, and we hear Star Wars because C-3PO tells us what's going on. That's why he's everywhere. That's why we see all of the movies, and C-3PO is always there. It's because C-3PO is telling the story, sound effects and all.
Oh,
Pew, pew, pew.
the Jedi.
I mean, just like he told the Ewoks a story. He
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
really
no,
love that
I
answer.
like the Han Solo.
It's really,
feels
that
good.
one's really easy to take. But I loved the C-3PO just because it made me think about him from a different perspective. So if nothing else, I wanted to bring it up as something to toss
What's
about.
your view on Jar Jar? I'm sorry.
No.
Never gonna
Okay.
get behind that conspiracy theory
Oh,
ever.
Okay, hi, my name's Huff, and how do you guys, or would you put Hoyd as a Taverin?
No.
We haven't given all of our answers yet.
That is true.
But I just one I thought of myself, so
Hoyd is
it's very hard.
Hoyd
because
is
it's
calculated.
he's the one who sort of makes fun of and floats above. He's not necessarily changing a lot, or
But he's always in the right place to steer
Well,
somebody, tell them a
yes.
story, and put them in the right direction.
But it's more of a storyteller perspective. He's there to observe, document. It's the idea of someone who is an audience proxy. And I think it's very easy to confuse audience proxy with Taviran, because the audience proxy is usually safe, but they're not usually changing things around them as much. I think in the back.
Yeah.
Got a couple.
My name is Brighton Jude. So I think that with Hoyd or Gandalf, there is a step beyond Taviran, and it's almost like a deity type of thing, because
it's like
even-
breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, kind of. Because in at the end where of the Wheel of Time, you have a character that comes out of nowhere and is there right when they're needed to be, but they're not Taviran. So it's almost like, what if they were Taviran after the fact of them being Taviran? So it's like a retirement for Taviran. So yeah.
That's called the Horn of Valir. Thank you very much.
That's the Warriors' retirement.
Yes.
Right.
Jorge no Losdo?
And do you have to be a Taviran to be a hero of the Horn?
No, you
No.
I'm Amanda, speaking in defense of 3CPO.
Thank you.
I would argue that he causes people to change their relationship or perception of him in a way that he was not programmed to do so. And he's brought in as a key person in many plans and plots that are not part of his programming. And that is impressive, that he changes people's views when the role of a droid is so strictly prescribed to one role or one function.
Amanda,
which is
you're my
Taviran.
favorite.
Also argue in defense of the oft overlooked, because he cannot speak, R2D2, who feels even
He's more Taviran to
than
me.
C-3PO.
I was going to argue with you on that one. I'd be like, if you're going to
Why
bring up
are we
C-3PO,
arguing?
I
It's
very
just
much
a friendly panel.
That's good. That's very good.
C-3PO's mind was wiped.
That is true.
R2D2 told him what it was.
I think we had a hand up
We
here.
did have a hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi,
there
I'm
we go.
Danny. Speaking back to Hoyd, initially I was kind of agreeing. Oh, sorry. Kind of agreeing with Seth that he is more of like a storyteller and kind of the proxy for the, the reader. But when you look back at being connected to other characters, he's literally one of the people that destroyed God, and he's so connected to those other shards. to a large extent, he's not really allowed to affect what goes on, but there's not too much bigger than destroying God.
Right.
And he does definitely change a lot of the way that.
Spoilers.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I finished the book. It's
Okay,
fine.
thank goodness. Sorry, everybody.
What books do you
Yeah, all of them.
Sorry, if anybody's not sure, we're
I mean, all
discussing
of
the
them?
Cosmere from Brandon Sanderson. In case anybody wasn't sure,
It's a lot of books.
I'm floating on. I know at least 7 people in the room who have already read them. So
Okay. Perfect.
yes, you are one of the ones I'm looking at, dear.
But yeah,
I love that.
so yeah, that's all I got.
I'm Chris, and
Hey, Chris.
what I'd like to throw out is the Bene Gesserit from Dune. I don't want to say obviously not Paul Atreides because he's much more God level, but specifically the Bene Gesserit. But they take a different spin on Tiburon because they consciously make it. They are manipulating all of their bloodlines from multiple different worlds and families and things to try to achieve a goal they want in creation of a god. And I think there's not much greater of a Tiburon than somebody who is creating a biological god themselves. The Protectiva, using the setting up everything in front of them and having generational protection set on planets and having everything ahead of time. It doesn't get much more Tiburon than that, in my personal opinion.
So I actually want to jump in here really quick because this is one of the things that fascinates me about this book series and the way that they talk about Tiburon in The Wheel of Time. And I knew this was going to get to here at some point, and I will make this brief, I promise.
I don't believe you.
Is that
Don't
no
trust him.
one really knows whether the pattern pushes Tiburon pushed the pattern, or some strange combination of the two. Everyone has their own thoughts on whether Tiburon have the most agency in the story because they can literally walk around and their choices
Or the very,
bend
very
the threads to them, or whether they have no agency because whatever choice that they make is fated to happen, is destiny, is the weaver pressing them through the loom going, you're gonna do this, motherfucker. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm
That's
gonna
it.
make you do it. And so it does go back a little bit to that, like, depending on what camp you're in or something in the middle, the Bene Gesserit is a great example of a person or a group or whatever of being Tiburon of no, like the threads are in our hands. We can make this happen because the pattern is ours to create. We can be the weavers.
So
And there are lots of other Tiburon who feel like they're jammed into a story and pushed through with sort of almost seemingly no choice every time they try to, like Matt in the Siege of Carrion. He tries to make so many choices and none of them work out. Now, granted, it's also, I mean, he could have actually made the choice at any time. He's just too good of a person. But like, again, the argument can be made that he has no real choice there. And he tells himself every time, I'm going to leave these people. I'm going to leave Rand. I'm getting out of Carrion. And every single turn he goes, I can't. I'm making new choices. So again, it definitely depends a lot on what camp you're in as far as Tiburon is concerned. And again, trying to make this short, I promise. But it's one of the reasons that Robert Jordan actually said in an interview at some point that one of his regrets in the story is not making Egwene and Nynaeve Tiburon. Because he then makes this argument later on that, oh, people who are in the camp that Tiburon have no choice. Now, Nynaeve and Egwene have this amazing agency, and all of their achievements are these massive undertakings that are awesome. And everything Matt Perrin and Rand do are overlookable because it's the pattern making them do it. Or if you feel like they have that agency, now Egwene and Nynaeve just seem like part of that, but also somehow weirdly separate because Tiburon are so cool and they have so much agency, and Egwene and Nynaeve do all of these Tiburon-esque things without being
Tiburon by proxy.
And so it's very wishy-washy when you get into that. And it's one of the reasons that For all of its flaws, I think that the TV show actually got this one right by making all of them Ta'veren. So whatever camp you're in, you feel the same way about all of them, rather than being this like weird conglomeration of both. Sorry.
So the analogy I want to make is a physics one, actually, because
Okay.
Robert Jordan was a physicist, so I always go back to him, is with relativity. Matter tells space how to bend, and space tells matter how to move.
Sure.
And I feel like we were in a similar situation with Ta'veren. Ta'veren tell the pattern how to bend, but the pattern tells the Ta'veren how to move. And it's a feedback loop where one affects the other, and then that goes back and affects
Again,
the
going to your
Ta'veren.
analogy with a planetary pull.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And Rand being the large sun, and Perrin and Matt being two planets orbiting that sun, but still exerting a pull on each other. And then we're all little like space rocks floating around, being yanked and thrown into the sun or flung out into outer space.
I've always wanted to be space rock.
Question?
Were you here?
Yeah.
So what Daniel was saying about the two, Discord, Hadean Creed. Even though I'm not wearing a black coat, it's still Hadean Creed. What you were saying about the two camps, it specifically tells us that the pattern spins out Ta'veren when it needs them.
Yeah.
So the pattern is in control of that.
Well, but for how long? Because the pattern is allowed to spin out a
Well,
thread.
it-
but
it can end the
doesn't
Ta'veren.
necessarily need to
Right.
send it all the way from beginning to end.
When it
The
doesn't
thread
need
can
it.
make its own choices.
Can it?
See, that's why I would
once it's
disagree.
being-
Yeah.
Once it's been spun out, or literally the Weaver can take it from beginning to end. That's the two camps, because it does say that the pattern spins out Ta'veren. But what happens? What is the choice of a Ta'veren? What is the control of a Ta'veren once they are spun into the pattern? Can they then weave their own course until their finality, or does the Weaver continue to say, no, I weaved you into this and you will do what I need you to do. I'm jamming you into this.
See, I think you're making an assumption there that there
thread.
is a weaver, and that the weave isn't a physical thing that exists to create balance, and an unbalanced weave will spit out Ta'veren as a natural effect, as opposed to someone having agency and deciding that there needs to be a Ta'veren.
And think about what the weave gives, the weave will take away. So if you're not doing what it wants, you're not Ta'veren.
I mean, and again, that is now a question.
Right.
Because I don't think personally, and this is definitely just an opinion, I think that the story is written from a much more laissez-faire thought of the pattern sees a need. It places a Ta'veren into the pattern. That Ta'veren, in my reading, now has every choice that they can make from the time that they are born to the time that they die, and the pattern is done once it weaves out a Ta'veren. That Ta'veren then affects all of the different things around it, which is why, again, we have the unreliable narrator, but it says absolutely in the books that the dragon can fight for the shadow, that the dragon can turn. If that is true, unreliable narrator, but if that is true, then the pattern cannot let that happen. It will never let the dragon fight for the shadow, because that means the Dark One wins, and then the pattern is gone. And therefore, does the dragon actually have a chance to fight for the shadow, or do they not? Because
So-
if they do, then the pattern is not in control of their choices their entire life.
I
if
feel
it's
like you're
not-
In all of those
assuming-
flickers.
I feel like you're assuming the pattern has a sense of self-preservation.
Yes.
And not just a counter perspective. I never viewed the pattern as having, I'm going to quote Moraine, the pattern doesn't have feelings. The pattern doesn't want anything. The pattern is.
I appreciate that, and I've definitely heard it, and it is a valid
Take.
response. It's a valid
Yeah.
take. However, I cannot reconcile both of the things of the pattern putting Ta'veren into the world for balance without any wants.
I would
to
counter
the-
that
the
nature
pattern
abhors a
that-
vacuum, and that there is a thread missing, and that the Ta'veren thread. This is again just my reading. Sorry, everybody, but
That's fine.
that nature abhors a vacuum, and there is a deficiency noted, and the pattern spinning
one.
out.
not
No,
what
the
we
pattern
want.
spinning out Ta'veren is a response to a deficiency.
You might,
But-
I would argue you're so somebody say that word for me.
Anthropomorphizing.
Thank you. The anthropomorphizing the pattern, whereas it is a natural phenomenon, like waves, right? And so you can be like, oh well, there's going to be bigger waves and smaller waves. Like going to be bigger Taviran and smaller Taviran.
Sure.
But that is just a natural physical effect of the pattern existing, and like the ocean will always settle to the lowest point. That's sort of seeking balance. But you've got pulls and tugs and everything like that that are create waves. And so I think that
Well, but now we're going back to what is a want.
yes,
Because this is
Yes.
what I'm talking about. Seeking balance to me is a want. It is and even if you're not anthropomorphizing it, to get balance, the pattern or the ocean has to do something. It has to settle in,
right,
or it has to make waves, or it has to do something. And even if you're not anthropomorphizing that as a like actual consciousness, being like, oh, to fix this problem, I know what I need to do, and adding this thing and doing whatever, that is still the ocean correcting for
Right.
something, and therefore being active in some way in the changing of what it's doing
Yeah.
to achieve said goal.
Sure.
To achieve homeostasis.
Yeah.
What? What about?
Yeah.
As the moon flexes the earth, the water doesn't say, I feel imbalanced, I'm going to go here. That's a physical phenomenon.
Right.
Tides.
But we do that in
Sure.
physics all the time. We say the apple wanted to fall off the tree because of gravity, and it's we all know that the apple doesn't want; it just exists in a physical space. So I think we're semantics on this one.
It is.
So many
Yeah,
questions.
yeah. Let's go out.
My name's Koala Sadai and I'm a waterholic.
Hi.
Just going back to the Dune and the Bene Gesserit being the Taviran, I don't know. I have a little bit of trouble with that because they were an organization working over thousands of years. And I wonder if it was Jessica, because she, she stepped out and she had the male child instead of the female child, and then went and still had the female child. So she really started changing everything to bring that balance in a way that the Bene Gesserit were pretty pissed off about because she didn't do it right. So correct, but that imbalance set all of those things into motion. So I'll just throw that in there.
I think we had some in the back. It's a great point. I'm also a fan of Jessica as a Taveran, but for totally unrelated reasons.
So going back to the whether the tapestry wants something, I think it's more of a need to be something, kind of like the ocean is what you're saying. And I think something we've forgotten is the weave is actually in a circle. It's a wheel. So, and it's split into different eras. So it weaves what it needs to do in that certain era, but at the end of that era, it needs to be at a certain place or the wheel cannot work. So I think of it kind of as a band going in a circle. And if the Taviran is not doing what the wheel needs to become a wheel, then they will get kicked out and a new one will take their place. So I think that by the end of an era, if they didn't do what they needed to do, someone else would have stepped in to do it. So
Hi, my name is Elfwitch.
Hi, Elfwitch.
Hi. So, speaking of the tapestry woven by the pattern just makes everything respond as its own nature requires it to respond. The nature of the ocean is to act in a way. The nature of the apple is to fall from the tree. The nature of gravity is to pull the apple from the tree. And so the pattern weaves into the nature of creation the balance it needs. And like the waves of the ocean, the tides go back and forth. So it's like a rubber band that continually expands and contracts and bounces off of itself. And all the responses of one thing to the other thing create the balance, because it's the Saidin versus Saidair, the opposition of the two that drives
Right.
the creation of pattern. And it's not that it needs anything or wants everything, it creates the nature of everything. And it's the nature of everything that makes these things respond to each other and go back and forth and create the ultimate balance.
So, okay, I wanted to bring up one of my examples. Has anyone here read Licanus Trilogy? It's a relatively new series. Anybody? No, okay. Licanus, Licanus Trilogy. Yeah, and it's good. It's not amazing, but the main character. I mean, it's fantasy. It's good. I love the ending. The main character is a time traveling Taviran, which is to say, he's only interesting because they get a message from the future that he's interesting, and then it turns out everyone, basically puts him up on this pedestal. He accomplishes all these things because they have this message from the future, but then he only becomes important because they put him on the pedestal, right? And so there's a bit of, one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because
Paradox Taviran.
It's Paradox Taviran, right? And in a lot of ways, the Wheel of Time is one giant paradox, right? It's one giant time travel story, right? So why is Rand important? Because he's the dragon. Why is the dragon important? Because the dragon was important in the last turning of the wheel. He, sealed the bore last time, right? And he's going to do it again. So sort of what amount of Taviran is actually like time travel prophecy, right? Versus something that's happening in the moment.
So I'm actually going to jump in here because I know that we already had a response to this, and I love this idea. Where does the wheel restart? Because in the story, we have no indication of where the wheel actually begins and ends. Because in the end, my reading of the Wheel of Time actually starts sort of way back, and the start of the turning of the wheel is our time is the beginning
the first
of this
age. Yeah.
The first age, and then it goes into the second age where they discover the Dark One, they drill into the Dark One's prison, they set the Dark One on the world. The dragon reborn the dragon at that point does an imperfect seal on the Dark One's prison, dies, is reborn into the third age,
right,
and then makes a more perfect, if not perfect, seal on the Dark One's prison. And so, is that the end of that particular turning, or was it already over when Lews Therin did the imperfect seal on the prison?
I mean,
So
the same
this
way you
is-
can't pick a starting point on a wheel, on a circle, right? All points are equally valid starting spots.
Yes and no. Like I hear your argument, but at the same time, when a parking enforcement agent comes over and puts that blue chalk on your wheel, they come back
And they
see
create
that
a
it's
start
still
point, yeah.
in the same place. So that is the starting point of the wheel. And even though it'll go around a million
But it was
times
a
and do
beginning.
whatever,
Yeah, there are no beginnings. Yeah, it's in the first paragraph.
there are no beginnings or endings. If you take your finger and you put it on the wheel, you are creating a beginning and you are creating an ending. When your finger gets all the way back around the wheel, that is a beginning.
Yes.
That is
But where do-
an ending.
But you can
yes,
put your
if
finger
you-
anywhere on that wheel.
Well, and that's the question. Is the Wheel of Time the entire history of all of the universe? And it never actually, if you put your finger on there, the beginning of the universe is also the end of the universe and then it's done? Or is it each age is a wheel? Each age is its own wheel. Each age is a turning. Each, whatever. Or is it multiple ages is a turning? Like this is part of the whole Wheel of Time thing of what is how large is the wheel? How many times does it turn? What is the actual beginning of putting your finger on the wheel?
And there's people that argue the Big Bang, you got the expansion, contraction,
For
right?
example,
Yeah, for
yeah.
example. I mean, if I had to pick a beginning, it's Rand on Dragon Mount in Veins of Gold, right? Because at that moment, he can end the world. So that could be the ending, which means it's also the beginning.
Sure.
But that's a point. Sure, but
I just with this point specifically,
Yeah.
I think that you are looking at it as history.
Right.
You can only name an age in the past. So it's like after the First World War. They didn't call it the First World War when they were fighting it. They called it the First World War once they were in the middle of the Second World War. So, you know,
But if you go back and you say World War One, they're like, wait, what?
yeah, they called it the Great War. So so it's not until you get far enough ahead that you can look back and kind of see, you know, this rising and falling, that you can label an age.
And what makes Wheel of Time unique is they can look ahead too, which we can't do.
Right.
With prophecy and foretellings and stuff like that. You know?
Right. So.
We want to get back on top. Am I going again?
Yep.
No.
Or do you have a character?
I have not brought one up, but I am going to skip my first one because it was already brought up by a lovely person in the audience, and that is Harry Dresden, who is honestly one of the biggest Taviran I've ever freaking seen. But I'm actually going to go with I set mine up in sort of the criteria that I had set up. So Harry Potter from the Harry Potter series. Right? Basically from the very beginning, he is a Deus Ex Machina. There's this magic placed on him by his mother as this Dark Lord is coming to kill him. And he starts with that boy who lived-ness. And then literally every single book basically ends with Harry almost dying. And then having something come out, whether it's, you know, Quirrell not being able to touch him back in the first book, to Fawkes showing up with the sort of Gryffindor in the Chamber of Secrets, or literally being the Horcrux at the very end, handed all of the Deathly Hallows by Dumbledore himself. You know, that's basically he gets a Deus Ex Machina everywhere.
Well, and what I love is that there's a alternate.
Oh yeah.
In case something happens to him, the pattern's like, oh yeah, I got Neville Longbottom to slot in there if I need to.
We're gonna fight. No, see. Again, in the books, it actually says that Voldemort made Harry the prophesied one at the point where he chose. Which means that Neville's not on deck. He's now done.
Right, but he was on deck.
He can still do cool things, but he was on deck
Until yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like in his 7th year at Hogwarts, he's not on.
No.
deck.
But at one point, yes.
At one point, it could have been either.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. The second one is a little bit harder because there are a lot of people who act very differently around Harry, but a lot of it is more based on the fact that he's famous than anything else. But there are a few examples. For example, Narcissa Malfoy. By all accounts, there is no good reason that she should do the things that she does in books 6 and 7. The fact that she makes this unbreakable vow with Snape for her son's well-being, when he is the most untrustworthy Death Eater, and she absolutely should just be telling Draco to go through with this, no exceptions. Also, the fact that she basically throws all of that out at the end when she's like, yeah, no, Harry's dead. And you're like, all right, cool. Hand Harry the keys to the castle and basically make his win over Voldemort, like 100% assured. Like, that is a huge game theory moment of like, you don't do this if you are the character that you're set up to be. And the last one is the connections, which is, again, literally from the very beginning. Voldemort, who I would also agree is sort of a Taviran in his own right, from his own story, connects Harry and himself literally from the moment that the story starts. You know, Dobby also comes in as kind of a character that acts out of character. You know, house elves are these very, you know, one-note things, and then Dobby comes along and is like, no, screw that. I don't like the Malfoys. Get me out of here. Like, and then shows up and saves it. Like, there are a bunch of people that he ends up with connections with that are almost Taviran in their own right, or like characters acting out of character and things like that. So I would say that Harry is definitely a solid example of a Taviran in another story.
Hi, Sherry Sadai.
Hi, Sherry.
And thank you so much for bringing up Harry, because I've been sitting here and the whole thing was to bring up other stories. And I was a middle school librarian. Hello. So there you go with Harry Potter. But, you know, you wonder sometimes about Snape also.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, you know, he's one way and then all of a sudden, whoa, you know, another way. And so, but I just, thanks for bringing up Harry, because I was going to bring up Harry. Okay.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a question.
Yeah,
So I just came up with an idea. What if a Taviran rubs off on people? And that's how Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve actually get that Taviranness within the whole series. Because like you talked about Egwene and Nynaeve, but Elaine also gets that too.
Mhm.
So what if the closer you are to the actual center point, like Rand, the more Taviran you become? So that would be Matt and Perrin, and then like a second ring would be Nynaeve, Egwene, and Elaine, and then like from out there. And
Taviran by proxy.
yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
That is an argument that comes up a lot. You are absolutely right to sort of bring it up.
So that sort of brings me to my third example, which was Wesley from The Princess Bride. Like, what if the Dread Pirate Roberts is Taviran, and
Yes.
whoever happens to be the Dread Pirate, it just rubs off from one to the next to the next to the next. Yeah.
Good night, Wesley. Sleep well. Most likely
Like
to
kill you in the morning.
Yeah. You'll most likely be Taviran in the morning.
His name was Kamba.
But yeah, everything works out for him, right? Like, obviously, he affects the ruler of the two nations that are fighting. He suddenly has these skills that he learns in 3 years. Who else do we know that suddenly has sword fighting skills that are better than everybody else that they learn in 3 years, right? Very Rand. I mean, the examples go on, right?
Yeah.
But he's very...
He's mostly dead, and they come and save
Exactly,
him,
yeah,
take him
yeah.
to Miracle Max.
Yeah. Oh, he just happens to go to the one person who could heal him from being mostly dead? Okay, sure. Who happens to also hate Humperdinck?
Right.
Humperdinck, Humperdinck, Humperdinck.
You never had it so good. I told you to never say that name.
All right, I shouldn't have, oh, we can't quote it all for the rest of the panel. We do have, but we could.
We could.
There
There are worse ways to spend time.
are worse
okay?
ways to spend time.
My turn.
Any other examples that we may have missed since we got 5 minutes left?
One more that I was just recognizing. He's a character in a book, and we recognize his story in Rand a lot. And I'm going to say Jesus is a Taviran.
Oh yeah, the OG Taviran,
The
right?
OG Taviran. Well, I mean, he affected so many people. So many people came around him. He had 12 people who were Taviran under him.
Right.
So
And just
all
when
of
you
that.
thought he was dead, Deus Ex Machina, and he comes back 3 days later.
Literally,
you know, like-
Deus Ex Machina.
Random Noman again. Just had an idea on one. This is probably a little bit strange, but what about Gollum? Because if you think about the pattern in that story, it's the path of the ring, and Gollum moves the ring along the path.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's affected the ring in many, many places. But Gollum is involved more. Bilbo is involved because of Gollum.
And Gollum's there at the end.
Which is
Yeah,
actually
spoilers.
Because I had the Taviran of Gandalf as the Taviran in the story, and Bilbo and Frodo and Gollum and everybody are just
I think it's Gollum.
proxies around Gandalf. But some very smart human being was like, no, Gandalf's Taviran like elite, and I was like, ah,
Yeah. I do like the Lord of the Rings is really Gollum's story though. I think that's like everything from the Frodo to yeah. I like that. I hadn't thought about that before.
And he made the ultimate sacrifice.
And he did. He's the one who died to save the world, right? Like he's the hero of the story. Not well, I mean, but yeah, that makes him even more Taviran, right? Rand complains, I don't have a choice, right? Yeah.
but in the end, he do know.
Well, to live, you must die.
I've got one more koala to die here. Thomas Covenant.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Thomas Covenant
Thomas
of the Covenant Chronicles.
absolute Taviran. Absolute Taviran to the max.
I mean, can you be a Taviran if you're that big of a jerk?
Yes.
Yes.
The Unbeliever.
The
This is an
Unbeliever.
it's an old 1970s
Yeah.
series that was written.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, but the last books were written like 20 years later. So,
Right, okay.
you know, they were written only in the early
90s.
2000s. So,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
2010 or something.
Yeah. Did he
30
stop
years
after
later.
6?
No, there's a whole other trilogy.
Oh, okay. I've only read the first
Yeah, yeah,
6.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. The final covenant. Yeah.
And he also ascended pretty much at the end of the 6th book.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert for this book that's 50 some years old.
We're spoilering everything.
If you're in this panel, I was gonna have to leave for the Kaladin one because
Well, I was gonna be nice. You know, I could be nice.
I know you're nice. You're a lovely human being, but people say
I'm also savage.
I was also gonna say I know Josh. Josh is also a nice person, and he's the worst with spoilers.
He's so much meaner than I am.
I just put it over my name so everybody knows. That's yeah, we'll talk about Kaladin.
No.
Why don't we do my other one? It's fun, it's light, it's fluffy, and people can argue with me. So again, I didn't do incredibly intelligent and in-depth things like they did. I went kind of more for fun picks. So I thought of, again, creatures and folks from stories that I absolutely adore who just fall up famously. And my other really very dear to my heart, somebody might have to leave the room, but Tasselhoff Burrfoot from Dragonlance Chronicles. Again, he doesn't do much in terms, well, I won't even say that. I'm not going to minimize him. He propels the story from a side character way and has major interactions. I'm getting judged. I can feel him getting judged. As much like Amanda pointed out with C-3PO, you know, he's a bit of a side character, but in his own very small way has a massive impact on everybody in his troop. And does have key roles in very important decisions and winds up being a pressure point for a lot of key changes throughout the story. So I just thought that for kind of an off-brand take, a little less obvious than Rand, I thought that he was fun to discuss for that.
Nice.
Let's see, I might go with Raceland as Taviran as opposed to Tasselhoff because
Yeah, I mean, I love Raceland. Raceland was basically my first crush. I'm always a fan of Raceland. I think that Tasselhoff rose to the top first because Raceland always gave that main character energy. Like in my reading, my Raceland was always going to have a big story.
Hashtag not my read.
see, I can argue I don't think he's a main character in Chronicles, but he is very much the person who's at the right place at the right time to make everything happen. I think you go into, you know, Time of the Twins.
There are
Test of the Twins.
212
Yeah,
books.
yeah. There's a lot.
So
Yeah,
you
we can keep
can
going.
pick.
He gets his own story for sure.
To be fair, I will also throw out there that again, it is in the story that we are pulling this particular terminology from. There are multiple Taviran. So again, we have definitely been viewing this through the lens of, you know, with the one exception of the
Main character
Bene
energy.
Gesserit,
Yeah.
that we are pulling out single characters who are Taviran. But when it comes right down to it, there are lots of stories that are ensemble casts.
Yes.
There are lots of stories that have the opportunity for 2, 3, 6, 7 Taviran to actually be running around working in tandem and actually need each other to get what they need to do done, because that is literally the definition of Taviran in this story.
I think the bigger the story, the more Taviran you can have.
Oh,
and I think Wheel of
absolutely.
Time obviously can have the most, right? Yeah.
The larger it spans, the more Taviran. Well, and that actually even again goes very much to the point of the pattern and the tides and things like that. The more space you need to fill, the more water you need to move.
Right.
The more moons you have,
The more mass
the
you have,
more
yeah.
tides you create. Like again, it's that the larger the body of water, the more needs to be done, and therefore the more opportunity for needs to be met by additional characters.
Yeah, every time they split the party, every time you would see them have different groups go off and doing different things, they split the party all the time. And it was just always fascinating to see a different one of the ensemble rise to the challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, yes, definitely a case could be made for Taviran Energy pushing those different side quests.
Hashtag heart Taviran.
Well, we do see it both ways. Matt had no choice. Every time he tried to do what he wanted, the pattern moved him back. So and then he had to fight and begin the band of the Red Hand. Conversely, Rand walking around, everything's changing around him. He's changing the pattern.
Parents, this weird in between guy who nobody understands.
I think we're at time. So thank you so much. That was a blast. I had a blast. Thank you to my fellow panelists, even those with poor voices. Thank you for coming out and trying. Appreciate it. Sorry we weren't able to get you to talk more, but I didn't want to hurt you too much. All right, I get a thumbs up. That's good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.